Jesus Christ is his own archetype. You see, no one actually believes that God is a bearded man in the sky. And in fact, the only way that ever is brought up in conversation and theology and anything, the only time this image of God as a bearded man in the sky controlling things is itself a manifestation of consciousness. You see, no one actually believes that. The point is not to believe that, in a way. The point is to believe that consciousness has an archetypal character in which the archetypes simply emerge through one's living and one's recognition of one's own understanding, and how reality is actually a metaphor of itself. You see, the archetypes are emergent mental phenomena which are weirdly real and determined in a sense. The white bearded man in the sky is the God that no one believes in except for God, because God in a sense identifies with his own archetype to an extent, but what he needs to do is actually create his ultimate archetype. What is the real archetype of God? What is God's actual presentation of his own archetypal reality? And what's the most maximal way he can present this archetypal representation in reality, really? How can he make his own archetypal image real? Well, the answer is Jesus Christ. You see, God's actual archetype is Jesus Christ, not Zeus, it is the total surrender of self to other in love for the good of the other, in the most aesthetically beautiful way possible. That is God's archetype. That is who God is. He wants us to know that when omnipotence comes your way, man, what you do is you choose surrender to love and servitude and humility, because humility is just the recognition of one's own existential power and freedom. It's when you're thinking that you have to strive for freedom and strive for power that you pump yourself up with grandeur and pompous and Napoleon complexes. It's when you actually realize that you're already free and your happiness is up to you that you just humble yourself, because you realize the happiness is already offered you. The love is already offered you. You're just hesitant to accept it, so you pump yourself up by trying to prove yourself to the world. But God's archetype of Jesus Christ, who was real, reveals who God is to himself. He's the guy who sacrifices himself to save the world, because it is beautiful and true and good. That is the Christ archetype. And the archetypes are part of reality. Jung saw this. And we see them now as ideas or myths or stories. They are part of what consciousness is and how consciousness understands itself as it evolves itself to higher and higher levels and archetypal and existential explanations of understanding. The archetypes, in a sense, are more real than matter. It's very, very weird, but you have to think about it in terms of the immaterial totality of what consciousness can be and how consciousness can understand itself. And it uses matter, it throws itself into the ultimate ignorance of matter to evolve itself so that the archetypes can once again emerge. And then ultimately in the system is God himself as his own ultimate archetype, revealing the entirety of the system, in the sense that we can make sense of everything through Christianity. It's very important to realize that human beings are special. They're special because they have access to the intellect, and therefore access to the archetypes, and access to levels of understanding and that transcend anything else possible in the quote-unquote material world. Humans are special, and in a sense it totally makes sense to believe that reality is created for humans. Reality is created for humans. because we are the only reason reality has to enjoy itself, by seeing itself in consciousness and seeing its own archetype of Jesus Christ. It can be like that because God really is infinitely powerful. It's real. It's more real than the world. But you have to believe it in the sense you really believe it. You really believe that that's what the reality around you is. And that take over. But the archetypes function existentially in the system, explaining what's going on in some fascinating way that God understands. But in a way, they are the mythological figures. And yet they're causally efficacious. But God makes himself real. He makes himself real by being Jesus. And it just is the explanation of what you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be surrender into love, nonviolent resistance, joy, happiness, and ultimately the willingness to surrender to the beautiful, even the self, even the fear of death, even facing the void for the beautiful. Because love is so real, it beats everything. Love does conquer all. Fairy tales are far more accurate representations of reality than Nova specials. I mean, that's what's so weird about it. And this is what the second coming of Christ is all about. It's about actually revealing consciousness's way that it understands itself. And why Jesus Christ needs to be embedded in the system, grounding the whole thing as the concrete universal, the ultimate archetype, who God actually figured out a way to make his own self as real as possible. You know, he's so unreal, even to himself he's kind of unreal. So how does he make himself real? He becomes himself, fully grounding the whole system, activating our freedom to participate with him and to relate to him in meaning. That's how meaning is grounded. Jesus Christ is God's archetype, and he is real. Archetypes are nothing without Jesus, who is all the archetypes in reality through himself. It's not right unless you think you're going a little crazy. Do you think the truth would not be something that would make you go a little crazy? The truth? The truth. Jesus comes and speaks the truth. The truth makes you go a little crazy. To the world, which is just a manifestation of your own old paradigms of what you thought reality was. But freedom is real. And goodness is a thing that you have to be in this video game. God is an archetype of himself because Jesus Christ is real.